Conscientiousness. Dad scored 97th and mom scored 83rd. And then let's break it down, I think. It breaks down into industriousness and orderliness. And then, Dad, do you want to give like a 2-second explanation of industriousness and orderliness?
Sure. Well, orderliness is associated with disgust sensitivity at the emotional level. And orderly people don't like things that shouldn't be touching. They like things where they should be. They like everything organized. They're more likely to have a schedule. Mess bothers them viscerally, just like disgust does. Tammy, what's our scores there?
Yeah, you can't talk about me yet. We don't have our scores up.
So you, Dad, scored 99th and Mom scored 96th. Wow, cool.
Yeah, but that's an interesting difference there too, because that makes me 1 in 100 on that dimension and her 1 in 25. And so...
Wow, it doesn't make any sense really, does it? What if I had...
It would make sense 30%. If we showed... It would make sense
well, then there'd be a huge
graph.
Difference. Then you'd be 1 in 3.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, left to my own devices, I would just work all the time.
Yeah.
And there are lots of people like that.
I could get a key and just lock you in there.
Yeah. Well, we kind of did that in my office because we learned.
No, I learned.
You go ahead. You can tell that story.
When you went to work, you didn't want to be interrupted. So I didn't interrupt you. So you could be there for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of fascinated by how you can do as much as possible in the shortest possible period of time. And that's always kind of a game for me. And that's associated with industriousness. I like to work. I would work all the time, pretty much. I'm getting better at leavening that with recreation, especially artistic recreation. And I like to spend time with your mom and you guys. So those were good breaks.
And I have a much more balanced life.
Yeah.
I have a much more balanced day-to-day experience.
Yeah, that was especially true.
And that was
years
good
ago.
For you.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you learned how to do some things besides work.
Yeah. Well, I also trained myself when I was especially in graduate school to really work. I wanted to see
how much.
I spent like 5 years pushing the limits of my ability to work. And then I figured out how to pull back a little bit from that because I was exhausted. I think when you're young, it's really useful for about 2 years or 3 years to work yourself to the point of exhaustion, to find out where that limit is and then dial back. And when you're young, you can kind of stand it because you're healthy as long as you don't drink too much, etc. But it's really useful to test that out. And so these career-obsessed people, they tend to be extremely high in industriousness. And it's a precondition for extreme success in most endeavors.
Yeah. It's like a game, right? It's like a contest.
It's a contest, yeah. Especially if you're a little disagreeable too. You know, so in orderliness,
I found university that way.
Now, what's the difference in orderliness between us?
Dad, you scored. This doesn't seem right. You scored 80th, and Mom scored 41st. But Mom was.
I think it was more aesthetics than orderliness. That's what I think.
So openness.
I liked beauty.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I still really like beauty.
It might have also been some.
And your disagreeableness probably made you less attached to objects.
Yes.
Oh yeah,
yes, definitely.
I'm not attached to anything.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing.
Baby pictures, baby books.
Yeah.
I went outside one day.
I've got those if you want them.
I should just give them to me, like out of my house. I went outside one day and I had this one book where I had drawn little figures in. It was like, I'm, however many centimeters tall, and this is my name, and I'm 5. And it was just sitting on the sidewalk. Mom was cleaning house.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
what?
Well, your mom, I think it is.
She doesn't love me.
I think it is lower agreeableness. I mean, Tammy's very good at getting rid of unnecessary things. And I know that was, perhaps not unnecessary.
Where's Julian's? It's not out here. What is that supposed to mean?
But it does clear away the clutter. And we've accumulated a lot of things, especially over the last few years. And your mom's ability to not get sentimentally attached to things unduly has been instrumental in us keeping our environs functional and hopefully beautiful to the degree we've been able to manage that.
Yeah, I don't know how old you were when I got rid of all the large suitcases. we could only have small suitcases, and you could only take that much stuff no matter where you were going or how long you were going for. And that was part of it was cluttery to have. We didn't have room for big suitcases. Okay, no more suitcases.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tour, just so people know, with a carry-on. It's very impressive. These outfits, carry-on. Okay, let us continue.
Do you know what the stewardess said to the vulture when he tried to bring 3 bags onto the plane? Only 2 carry-ons allowed, sir. Yeah. I sent that to Reader's Digest, and I got $100 check for it.
That makes the story so much better.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, well, I really liked Reader's Digest when I was a kid. You know, it was a good magazine.
Oh, so did
I remember seeing that it was written in there for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I bet people are going to scrambling to get their hands on those now. We should have some of those.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, just try to make money just in any way possible. Okay. We covered extroversion. Enthusiasm is fun. Assertiveness.
Enthusiasm, that means to be possessed by God, by the way.
Enthusiasm, that should just say fun instead.
Yeah,
Enthusiasm
it's a
or
lot
fun.
of positive emotion, and extroversion is the positive emotion dimension, and
Although,
extroverts
you know,
are fun to be around.
I used to think that enthusiasm meant somebody knew what they were doing, but now I know it's just enthusiasm,
Yeah.
and I can discount it.
Them being like, that's a great idea.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
great
like,
idea. Here's the plan. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
We're like, oh, wow. Okay. You're
Yeah.
really into this.
that's why you
Like,
need.
no, you're into everything.
Yeah, exactly. Every idea is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, too much enthusiasm makes you manic.
I've had that
Ah,
that issue a bit.
Yeah, it makes you manic.
Everything's-
That's that. So every trait pushed to its extreme can
Yeah.
degenerate into a pathology, and that's true of all of them. You might think you can't be too creative. It's like, oh yes, you can. You see patterns everywhere, even when they're not there. So, and it's very difficult for highly creative people to catalyze an identity because they're interested in everything. That's different than being enthusiastic about everything. You can be interested in everything without thinking everything's a great idea and let's get on it.
Or you can be
And
both
Extroverts are impulsive. So,
and fun.
yeah, well, and it's certainly the case that you can have too much fun. One of the things that was painful about having children was the realization of how much time you spend disciplining them because they're having too much fun, because they run around and, they get too excited and then they wear themselves out, or they trip over things or bump into each other. It's like, settle down. And you think, I'm educating my children not to be happy. It's like, well, everything has its limits.
I'm happy.
that's good.
Okay. Neuroticism. Actually, first, quick question. What happens in couples if you have one person who's super extroverted and one person who's not? Because that to me
Well, my
seems
mom and
like
my dad was probably as extroverted as you guys because
Yeah,
he was
Grandpa's.
super extroverted. My mother was not.
Is super extroverted.
Yeah, he's 90 and still funny.
Yeah.
Still
And he's the
extroverted.
life of the party, man. And he was the life of the party in Fairview.
Yeah.
I think your
His
dad
whole
was
life, I
think your
imagine.
dad was the most extroverted person in our town.
It seemed that way, yeah.
I mean, he was and there was about
He
3,000
was way
people
more
there.
extroverted than I was.
Yeah, way more. Way more.
I was always quite surprised by his enthusiasm and his gall of just doing anything.
And he was
he's also
low in agreeableness too.
super like low in politeness.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's hilarious.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, but you don't. Yeah, and he'll tell you what he
but-
thinks too, man. Even kids.
Yeah.
It's like I told my kids, don't do anything to annoy your grandfather. He will not forgive you. And you
Yeah,
were good.
well,
You were
Grandpa.
good. But
But
yeah,
my mother was very quiet.
yeah, unbelievably
And I don't think
introverted.
she would have known anyone if it weren't for my father, because he brought people to her. And I don't think she had the temperament to bring people to her. She didn't. So thank God that she found him and that he found her.
Yeah,
really.
and introverts get worn out by social interaction and they need to go have a break fairly frequently, whereas extroverts get energized. And so, yeah, it was tricky for your mom and dad because it was hard for them to bridge that gap because your dad was always out socializing
Yes.
and your mom enjoyed that and she thought he was funny, but she was very
But you
introverted.
didn't go out with him.
And she didn't really go out and make friends on her own either.
Through sports, And that's something that she did was sports. Even though she was introverted, she could act out something,
Open.
but not, maybe more open.
Yeah, because that can sometimes override it, right? If you're an introvert, but you're high in openness.
Well, she was actually a good athlete too, so that helped a lot. It was a domain of competence for her. And that's a kind of social activity, right? It's not sitting around talking, which extroverts will do. It was going out and doing things with people. And so that's something for introverts to consider too. It's a good avenue to social interaction, shared activity rather than mere socialized conversation.
Like dancing. They went dancing.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
yeah.
bet. You bet.
They curled together, they golfed together. And Mom went and watched all the sports that Dad did, hockey and baseball. And so she was out with people when he was doing things. And then when she was a little older, she was doing them too. And did very well with them.
Yeah. My mom is extremely high in enthusiasm, and my dad is very low in enthusiasm, although he's quite assertive. Makes him a complicated character because he's half extroverted and half introverted. And so he was difficult to understand in that way. But it's difficult to rouse Dad to enthusiasm for any activity. And that's hard on my mom because she's really enthusiastic and less assertive, although not unassertive. And so that has been a point of conflict between them in their relationship.